Welcome to Chris and Jen in the Morning.
Where it's always morning somewhere.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Jen. We are
And
so excited to have you with us.
yes, I'm so excited to have you back. I flied solo dish last week with Ace. We missed you deeply. I did not laugh as much as what I usually do, mainly because it's like a one-sided conversation, just me talking at a screen. It's much more entertaining when you're here.
I did tell Ace to take my spot and just use his Jen voice. But
yeah, and you have that wig. He could have thrown that on, and that voice, no one would have known. No one would have known.
No, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, are you saying I need to save?
Okay, good point. Good point. I didn't think that one all the way through. Nonetheless, I am happy to have you back.
It's good to be back. It's good to be back. And thank you for keeping things moving in my absence so that I could go be with my family and just take care of life.
That's right, because life happens.
It does happen, which brings me to my gratitude moment, actually. So my dad earlier this year was diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia, which is, no cancer is ever good. But if you're going to get cancer, it's not one of the worst ones to get. You can usually, when you catch it early, treat it with a pill for the rest of your life and go on to feel better and live a normal life. And that's what we thought was going to happen. But I very rapidly transformed into acute lymphoblastic leukemia, which is when it is adult onset, like a very aggressive, much more rare blood cancer to get. And so I had to step away and drive up to be with him at the hospital. And while all of this is going on and you're just trying to take in like this really big thing that's happening, what I'm super grateful for is the people at the hospital who work on the cancer floor at St. Francis in Wichita. The compassion with which every single human that we interacted with brought to their day-to-day was, not something that I take for granted. It can't be easy to do the jobs that they do. And, in handoff from one nurse to the next, they walk in together with the shift change and introduce the next person that's going to be caretaking. And as we walk out, we see them literally sitting at the nurse's desk, sharing information with each other about, what is going on. And, I think the other thing that really stood out to me is every single person that was there when my dad would tell them about what was going on with him and how he was feeling would really listen to everything that he was saying, even if it wasn't related to something that they dealt with. And then actually talk about how they were going to follow up with the right care provider. And I just have had experiences that are very different in a hospital setting. And so I'm incredibly grateful that these people not only have chosen to spend their life doing this work, but also, that they bring that level of care because it makes such a big deal. So
it does.
In the midst of all of the chaos and the, struggle to go, what's going on? That was just a huge help to know that there are people surrounding him that truly care about him and are choosing to make sure that he gets the best care that he can. So incredibly grateful for that.
Yeah. And it sounds like he is in the best place that he could possibly be for the care that he needs. And, you and I chatted a few times throughout the week, and I'm so happy you were able to go up and be there, because I do think when you get to hear things from people directly who have the knowledge, the skill, the ability, it just brings a different level of comfort and security. And just to be able to see your loved one being so well taken care of also brings an amount of peace that I just don't think a phone call or a FaceTime can really quite get across. So
yeah. I'm back for a short amount of time and then I'm heading back, but it is frustrating while I'm here to be in a place where I'm I can't really figure out exactly what's going on. And so I'm grateful for many things. I'm grateful that you guys filled in for me while I was gone and kept things moving. I am grateful that we are a team and I can rely on you. And that is a gift that I do not take for granted. I'm grateful for the many people in my life who have reached out with words of support and care and, just so many things to be grateful for. But, I know how hard it is to be a healthcare worker sometimes. And I just am incredibly grateful that people dedicate their lives to this and choose to show up for other
Yeah.
people when they need it the most. So,
Yep. Yep. Okay, well, that is such a great gratitude moment,
yeah,
and
how do you follow that?
yeah, I should have kicked this one off. Because mine's, I'm not going to say shallow, but the thing that I am most
All
grateful
gratitude is
for.
important.
So, you guys have been to visit us many a times, and I take you to my most favorite little cafe here in Sunnyside, the Sunnyside Brothers Cafe.
Yeah.
And I adore this place. It is like a small, a family owned business. And they used to be just right around the corner from us.
Yes.
They got a new space and moved down the block a little bit
A
further.
bigger space, right?
Bigger space, newer space, all wonderful. But I think it was like in May or June. No, it had to maybe even March or April. They had a small fire in their new place, and it caused a few of the fire sprinklers to go off. And so they had been closed for several months because you have to like go through the process of like, they obviously fixed the thing that caused the fire, which ultimately was not a big thing, but more of the damage was caused by the water sprinklers
Yeah.
coming on. And so they had to go through the process of drywall, paint. The city has to come in and inspect everything. So just all of those things. Um, so they reopened 2 weeks ago, and
Very exciting.
it's very exciting. But I think what's more endearing, and I've talked about how much I love living in Sunnyside, but the community really showed up for them. Like within their first, they opened on a Thursday. And every time I walked by or went in, we went in twice in one weekend, which I'm totally fine with. I love their food. They have so many options, but they were always full. And there were always orders going out, and so the community like really showed up for them, really supported them. You saw posts on Facebook, on Instagram. People were really sharing the good news that they were back.
Yeah.
One of their birthdays, one of the brothers who owns the business, it was his birthday the first weekend. And so they posted about that. So more people came in, and there were balloons and flowers and things. So it was just really
Oh,
great to kind of see this spot that the community has come to love
I love it.
back, number one, but number two, that the community showed up for them. It's really great. If you ever have the opportunity to visit, I'm going to just say New York City in totality, you should come out to Sunnyside, take the 7 train to 40th Street and get off the subway. And it's just like it's not even two buildings. It's like the first building, and it's so easy to get to. Love their
And you have
food,
to
love
sing
the
the song
service.
while you're on the train, otherwise you don't appear.
Jen sings the song. I'm amazed I said Sunnyside twice now, and you haven't. Well, now 3 times, and you haven't sung.
It's in
It's all
me.
in there. It's all in there.
Stay on the sunny side, always on the sunny side. Stay on the sunny side of life. You'll feel the pain, it'll drive you insane. So stay on the sunny side of life.
So yeah, so I'm very happy that they're back. I'm very happy the community showed up for them, and I just love living in
That's
this little
amazing.
community. So
I love that. I love that.
yeah.
People think about New York City and think, oh, it's so big. It's the big city. It's so impersonal. And I actually, while I was just back home, people were talking about New York going, yeah, like you just have this perception of New Yorkers, like they're so rude and they were so nice. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, like there's people. But I think, when you're not from a big city, like that's the impression you get, and really the feel of the city to me has always been, of New York City specifically, has always been incredibly welcome and kind, and it's just a lovely place.
Yeah, look, I think if you come and you have the opportunity to visit, like just like anywhere you travel, you make it what you want it to be. There are
Yes.
always going to be people who are trying to get someplace or trying to, and they're not always the nicest, they're not always the most helpful, but for the most part, people are willing to like provide directions, point you where to what you're looking for. I love living here. I will say the city feels a little different. I don't know if you've experienced it since you've come since the pandemic. I do feel like it's changed a little bit.
Well, I think that's our world in general.
That's true.
I don't
That's
know.
very true.
Certainly, my life is very different than it used to be before, but I do think we've all changed a little bit because
Yeah.
of the pandemic. Like just habits changed and routines changed, and, some things are not the same and we think about them nostalgically, and then some things are new and exciting.
Right, exactly. And I mean, maybe that could be a podcast episode entirety of like, because if you think about like the pandemic, it went on for what? Like it took a year for a vaccine to get to the general
I
public.
think 10 years from now, we will still be measuring time pre and post
Yeah,
pandemic.
I agree.
It's just definitely a marker in our history through our lived experience.
Right.
Well, highly recommend if you haven't been to New York City to visit New York City and to visit Sunnyside. And you may or may not have to sing the song when you ride the train in order to get there, but it sure makes the ride better, I think.
Sure does. It makes it entertaining to the tops.
Just sing it in your head because all the other people on the train may fill you up. Just give you mean looks. So speaking of recommendations, I actually recommended a book to you, which like I can count on one hand the number of books I have recommended to people. And this wasn't even like a, hey, read this to like fix your life sort of a book. This was like a, oh, I read this book and I really loved it. And so I think you should read it. Um,
Do you want to explain why you do quotations for those of who are
yeah.
watching the YouTube
Because
version?
Chris and my husband, our producer Ace, listen to books through like Audible as opposed to reading them with their eyeballs. And I take the word read very literally, which means to use your eyeballs to words. So when they say, "Oh, I read 25 books," they didn't actually read 25 books. They listened to I mean, anyone can listen to 25 books. Like, come on. So that's how I feel about that. But I actually much prefer to generally read a book with my eyeballs because then I can decide the voice in my head that's reading the words as opposed to whatever voice is reading it that may be great and maybe not so great. But I digress. The book I recommended that I said, I really like this book, you have to read it, and then you didn't read it. And I was like, Christopher, what am I? Like, I recommended a book to you months ago and you've read all these books and you haven't read it. So I sort of
Well,
peer
in
pressured
all
you.
fairness, I was reading another book, and it was not a great book, like by any stretch of the imagination. So it took me a really long time to get through it.
I
And
don't
then,
buy that from the time you visited me in April to like 2 weeks ago, were on the same book. I don't buy that. I don't
well, I'm also
buy
part of a
it.
book club, so I have to listen to those books so that I can
Just
participate in
saying.
the conversation.
So the book is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. I loved it, but I have no idea what Chris thought about it, and I'm slightly terrified to hear. So, Chris, what did you think about the book?
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say, like, I broached the conversation with Ace last week about my initial feelings of this book. And I
Oh,
was
you didn't
like,
like it
I
initially.
don't understand why Jen,
Why Jen wants me to read this book.
because you had like recommended it again, like you kind of got onto me, if you will, about having not read it whenever I was talking about another book that I was very unhappy with. And you were like, oh, by the way, have you read this? I recommended it to you. And so I prioritized it. I finished the book I was listening to, and then I started that one. But I had only gotten through the first few chapters when we were recording, and I told Ace, like, I just don't understand why Jen would have recommended this book to me based on the things that I said about this book that I just said I didn't enjoy reading and didn't like.
What were those things?
Basically his instructions to me were, I want you two to have that conversation, but do it on camera, please.
Okay, so what did you say to him? What did you say to him at that point when you had just read part of the book?
So the first part of the book to me
Right.
is right. So this, I mean, I don't know if
I also
people
don't know
are
who's reading it. So
right.
whoever's
Spoiler
reading
alerts. Absolutely.
whoever's reading the book could be terrible at it. No,
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 no.
no.
Like, I don't know who's audibly reading the
Yes,
book.
the narrator was fantastic. Like, I mean, absolutely loved her. So I will say before we jump any further, if you are reading Eleanor Oliphant or the book called Eileen and you don't want anything ruined, stop listening now because
I can't
we're going to
remember
discuss.
what you said about the book Eileen, but there must have been something where I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds similar to this other book, except this other book was good. So read
Yes.
it.
Yeah. So there's definitely some similarities. So both are written in first person
Mm-hmm.
and you're truly like experiencing life through the narrator, which they are both in both books unreliable because it's
Mm-hmm.
only their perspective on life. Now, when I had
I mean,
gotten
isn't that all of us?
correct, yeah. I'm not saying that that's not the truth, but I will say when I'm reading a book, I like a story that's moving quite quickly. I enjoy from different perspectives, from like you're hearing different chapters could be through different characters' eyes so that you are getting like this full picture of what is happening. So where I would say the compare and contrast of these two books, Eleanor Oliphant and Eileen, are very different is the path that they end up taking, where Eileen kind of breaks off and goes into this dark bleakness type feeling.
Mm.
Eleanor Oliphant so happily goes in a different direction. But
She goes through a healing process.
correct. But I'll say, whenever I was just getting started in it,
You were like,
it
not
did
again.
not. That is exactly what I said. And I think, Ace, I think those are the exact words that I said to you was like, why would she make me go through this again? Like, I just told her that I didn't enjoy this book. And here I am again, like listening to this story. However, I will say I am the type of person, if I start a story, I have to finish it. I
Yeah.
cannot just turn it off and walk away.
Very few times I have done that where I just was like, I can't finish this book.
Yeah.
Too dumb. It's too dumb.
Right. You can't go on, which I totally get like those. Like I don't think I've had quite that experience yet, but I will say this is definitely, I'm glad I hung on through this.
I'm glad you did too. If you hadn't, I'd have read it to you. And this is our podcast where Jen finishes reading Chris the book. Note that he's duct taped to the chair.
And his headphones are taped in.
In stereo.
But I will say I'm very glad that I stuck with it because, like I said, the two books definitely take a very different paths to where I do not recommend Eileen. And I'm sorry if there is anyone out there who absolutely loves that book and like cherishes it. I am sure there is a reason and I would love to hear those reasons. So please reach out.
It's so funny to me that Eileen and Eleanor, their names are so
right
similar. Like
I
you
know.
could confuse them. So don't get confused. Eleanor Oliphant.
Yes.
Is completely fine.
So what I told Ace is like, I want to know from Jen why she recommended this book for me. So I guess like that is my first question to you is like, now that I've read the whole thing, I get it. But like,
well, I read a book that I like, that I really like, that I feel like was more than just a Hallmark movie book, but like was a like something thought provoking. And I just want everyone to read it. And, you're my everyone. So, needed you to read it. But I also like you were talking about Eleanor and, I think I don't recall the conversation fully, but, about kind of how the bleakness of it and just didn't seem to be going anywhere good. And
I was talking about Eileen. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Eileen.
Yeah.
Here I'm confusing
See,
the names.
you're getting it confused.
Yeah. And probably the fact that Eleanor and Eileen, that like triggered something for me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is a so much better book. Like, just read this one. But I think, what you said in terms of the book being written from one perspective in first person, like, that's one of the things that I loved so much about what Gail Honeyman did in this book is she really kept you in Eleanor's perspective through the whole thing. And all of the clues that you get through the book about what's going on with Eleanor, they're like little clues you have to pay attention to about how other people are responding to her. And then you have to decide, like, is this because those people are like jerks, or is this like, how is Eleanor showing up in these situations? And you kind of get even from the very beginning that like there's something kind of going on with Eleanor.
Yeah.
But you know,
What do you mind if I ask, like, what, because I agree. Like, I definitely didn't feel like well-adjusted adult moving through life. Like, I definitely felt like there was
no.
something going on. Did you have any initial thoughts of like
Well,
what
yeah,
it could
at the
be?
beginning, I thought, like she's definitely on the spectrum, is
Hmm.
what I was thinking.
Yeah, same here.
But at the end, I was like, well, was she on the spectrum or is this like unresolved trauma that is
Yeah,
causing her to show up in these ways, and you kind of see her start to heal at the
yeah,
end. And it's not a book where you ride off into the sunset and magically everything is fine. It's just sort of but you don't really know. You kind of start to suspect as the book unfolds, but you don't really know if what's going on with Eleanor is really reality or if it's just Eleanor's reality. And for me, that's part of why I couldn't put the book down because she's talking to her mom weekly.
yeah,
And like you're going, well, this doesn't make logical sense the way that the conversations are being described. So is she just projecting this on her mom or is she like what is the author just not connected to reality? Like you kind of don't know. And then in the end, you you find out.
yeah. I
But
find that really interesting because I do think as I was reading it, I definitely picked up like something like she's probably on the spectrum, mainly because of like the routine that she
yeah,
kept in her
yeah.
life.
But she probably, I mean, she could have been keeping that routine because
Oh,
of
yeah, yeah, yeah,
what she was
absolutely.
dealing with, right? That you just
Yes,
didn't know.
absolutely. But I think that was like the beauty in the writing was that
Yes.
you didn't know. Like you knew there was something, but you didn't know what the thing was. So you wanted to continue reading, listening so that you could figure that part out. I think it's interesting your comparison of the conversations that she had with her mom, because in my mind, that's where I started picking up on something's not right in that relationship. Like there is a
But did you think that the mom wasn't even there? That
no,
wasn't even yeah, I
no.
didn't either. And
In
so
fact, when that comes out, my heart kind of broke for her. Like I was standing in the kitchen chopping broccoli for a salad and she's
you
talking
just start
about it
bawling.
and I just started like I just in my head I was like I just want to give her a hug, but I know she wouldn't like a hug. Like what do you do for someone like that?
Yeah, and that she does have a friend.
She does.
I think to me that was beautiful too.
So that
Watching
yeah.
watching her navigate friendship, watching the kindness of other, somebody else to go, this person doesn't quite fit the mold, but like I'm not paying attention to that. I'm not judging them. I think to me that was just really um like moving.
So, what I thought was really cool about the relationship between her and Raymond was you get to see them it's like from the start. Like it's a very like you get to know how they're introduced and then how that relationship progresses and evolves, which I don't think you get in a lot of stories, right? Like a lot of them are like these characters already know each other or they're like introduced to one another, but like you begin to see what relationships, friendship
Yeah.
means to her because it's all from her perspective. And so you get to, that's the journey that I kind of enjoyed going on, which was also kind of why I was afraid because in Eileen, like she talks about these relationships that she has with people, her coworkers, her neighbors, her, all of these other people like around her in her life. And that's exactly how this story started with Eleanor. And I was like, I cannot go through this again. Like there were no redeeming qualities to Eileen. None. Like do I feel bad for that character? I absolutely do. But it
This one
But Eleanor,
definitely
you do. Like you,
invokes compassion.
correct.
I think for me, it made something that doesn't fit the mold of what we call normal more real and tangible. And
Yeah.
it kind of makes you think about how you perceive and interact with the world around you and kind of slow down and think about that. But what I loved is in the end, you go, well, is it that this person is different, or is it that they have gone through this traumatic experience and they just have had no support? And like Raymond comes along and helps bring, life to Eleanor, who, by all accounts is just going through the motion and not really living. I mean, there's a point where she just doesn't see a point in it anymore.
Yeah.
I
I think
think,
one of the best quotes in the book, and there were many of moments in the book that like just kind of made her real. Like I don't care where you've been in
yeah.
your life, but like one of the excerpts from it is like there are days when I feel so lightly connected to the earth that the threads that tether me to the planet are gossamer thin. Spun sugar, a strong gust of wind could dislodge me completely, and I'd lift off and blow away like one of those seeds in a dandelion clock. The threads tighten slightly from Monday to Friday, meaning her work life is what keeps her like tethered. But there are at least 2 days in a week that she doesn't have that. Like that to me is like if you've gone through depression, if you've gone through like you know that feeling. And
Well,
I heard it and it just like brought tears to my eyes because I'm just like, oh my gosh. And this character doesn't she doesn't have anyone close to talk to that stuff about.
yeah, and I think, the thing that I really want to talk about, that this book brings for me, that I want to spend some time talking about with you today is like this theme of secrets. Because Eleanor was keeping secrets from everybody else, but she was keeping secrets from herself. And there was some conscious awareness in and out at points where she knew that there were things that she didn't know, and the social worker comes and there's a big fat file on her, and she doesn't want to read it, but it's like this repressed memory of what happened to
Yeah.
her and how these secrets kept her stuck, kept her kind of frozen, and things would happen like as she begins to form these relationships like with Raymond, things would happen that would sort of trigger in her this like trauma that she was, not remembering.
Yeah.
And the way that she perceived the world all around her was so driven by these secrets that, really started to control her life. And
Right.
so that to me is what really stood out about this book.
Well, and I think all of us can identify with like building these walls of, what we want people to see, what we don't want people to see, how we engage with people. And I think as we talk about, her having these secrets, it's like I think part of it was her not knowing like how to engage and how to show up for others, I guess, is like she knew this what she thought was the social norms. And
Yeah.
so she like ticked those boxes. But going beyond that, like she never wanted anyone to see more. And was that a protective screen, or was that a genuine conscious decision that she was making? I think it's up for debate, but
Well, she
I
didn't want to. She did not want to see more. She
no,
had
she
that.
didn't.
She had that plant that was her friend.
Correct.
But and the plant reminded her of her lost sister, and yet consciously she wasn't accepting that. And I think to me, and at least that's what I took away when I was reading it. And to me, that just really spoke to the mind is a really powerful thing.
Yeah.
And, I've read a lot about how memories get created and stored. And, there are actually different pathways and different places in your brain where memories get stored. And when fear is engaged and memories are created, they get stored in a different place in a different way. And your like that's just neuroscience. Your body actually does that to protect you because it's encoding memory to give you messages to help you avoid future situations that could put you in danger, but you don't really recall those memories in the conscious. And so they can get confused. So those triggers can get tripped unnecessarily, and it really starts to inform
Yeah.
a lot of times in a negative way how you start to live your life. The theme for me is we started talking in episodes past about feelings and feelings being signals that your body is sending you, and stopping and listening to what is it that your body is trying to tell you. And when you feel emotions that seem bigger than the situation at hand, like that's a sign that you should stop and think about what is
Yeah.
it that I'm not dealing with, that I'm choosing not to deal with, that I'm not dealing with. And for me, that's how anyone who's been through something that's really traumatic and you've kind of encoded those memories in that place where you're not consciously remembering them so that they don't continue to hold power over you. You know, you have to stop, whether you remember those things at the conscious level ever or not, you have to stop and go, wait a second, is something else informing me of, this situation? So to me, that was like really powerful.
Yeah. So when I finished reading, I texted you and said, "Oh, I'm finished reading, so we can
Talk about it,
talk about
which
it."
we haven't yet.
Right. This is the first time we're talking about it because Ace requested that we do it on camera. So we are, I think this time we are meeting the producer's expectations. And so whenever you said secrets, and I didn't want to like dive too deep into it because I didn't like, I wanted this conversation to happen here, but I thought it was interesting that that's what you felt like a big theme was coming out of it. And having just heard you explain that, like, I think that's interesting because I think I would argue a counterpoint of
Yeah.
like, I don't think she could process that stuff. One, because it happened so early in her life, and for protective reasons, like her brain did all of the things to protect her. But I don't know if I would say like she knowingly was keeping
Oh,
secrets.
no, no, no. Not suggesting that she was knowingly keeping. I do think that there are some things throughout the book that she absolutely is knowingly keeping secret.
Yes, I do
And
agree.
she talks about that. She talks about hiding some of her behavior or wanting to kind of draw within. Not because she fully understands what's going on with her, but because yeah, I think that was a protective thing. She
Yeah.
probably,
And I think
this
the
character probably learned.
Yeah, and I think the author did a good job kind of showing you her development, her growth. I don't know what you
Love
would
a good
call it.
character that actually develops over time.
Yes. But when she starts the book, she talks about why she always says that she's fine because it's social norms. That's all people want to hear. So on. So she's giving people what they want to hear. But then about midway-ish through the book, someone offers to buy her a drink, and she actually verbalizes, which I don't know if she would have done at the beginning of the book. She actually verbalizes like, no, I don't want you
I
to
don't
buy
want to
me
owe
a
you.
drink because then I would
Yeah.
feel like I'd owe you. And I don't think I want to give you 2 drinks of my time. And so to me, I loved seeing that, like, that growth for her, because where she goes from this place of checking the box of the social norms to this place of, no, I'm allowed to take up space. I'm allowed to have an opinion. I'm allowed to live life how I want it. Like, I just love to see her kind of growth through the book.
Yeah.
And the like, along with that, which I find like one of the themes is that I think she was able to start diving deeper into these things because she began to let those walls down. She
Yeah.
began to have people that she could connect with and felt safe with, and like kind of had that push and pull with them. And so we talk about like Raymond being a character who was like there for her, and you see their relationship blossom. And I saw him as like the steady Eddie. Like he was living his life how he wanted it, and could see like that's what she was doing too, but it wasn't necessarily in the social norms way.
Yeah. No, not at all. But he also just had some genuine kindness as opposed to keeping that like barrier or that distance that, is sort of culturally polite to keep.
Yeah.
And I think that's what cut through Eleanor's walls. But I think when I say secrets, I feel like for you, that's holding some connotation that, this is like an active choice to keep something a secret. And I think the thing about secrets is that oftentimes the secrets that we keep it's not really an active choice that we're keeping these secrets. And, you know, for me, when I think about secrecy, secrets create shame. And, you know, I'm a fan of the work that Brene Brown has done around shame and kind of the thought leadership that she has in that space. And I think, you know, one of the things that I really believe is that sometimes when you share something or you say it out loud, even if it's just to yourself, speaking it out loud, getting it outside of your head, you start to realize that maybe it's not as logical as it all sounds
Yeah.
inside your head. And like keeping those secrets often even from ourselves and not being honest with ourselves about like what it is that we're really thinking, what's happening inside our head. We get so busy and we just don't take the time to really think about it. And it can be really isolating. And so then the thing just continues to get bigger and bigger and start to really control your life. And so a few examples of that that come to mind for me, you know, we both love the movie Wicked. And you know the musical Wicked and my first Broadway show Wicked. Um, and there's a point that we've talked about in the past, in one of our past episodes, when we
Yeah.
talked about Wicked, where Elphaba finally tells Galinda her big secret about how her sister's legs and her mom's death she feels like was really all her fault. And Galinda immediately responds with, "Oh, honey, like that is not your fault."
Yeah.
And just by taking that thing that, you know, was just this secret and giving voice to it, there becomes this beginning of healing, this
Yeah.
opportunity for some additional perspective that this may not be the way the rest of the world sees things. And I do think as I read Eleanor Oliphant, there are things that she, for, you know, all of the very explainable reasons, was keeping these secrets from herself subconsciously and then choosing to spend her weekends drowning out the noise in her head by drinking. You know, you kind of find that out later as the book unfolds and she starts to talk about her weekend routine, but like she drinks every single weekend, all
Yep.
weekend long,
Yep.
because she wants to keep those things in her head a secret from herself.
Well, I think she says like whenever the thoughts get too loud,
Yeah.
she picks
So
up the
instead of
vodka bottle.
thinking about them and
Right.
processing them, she wants to push them back.
Right.
And so that's why I think about secrets, because these things still inform how she feels, how she acts, and yet, like, she's burying them
Yeah.
deeper and deeper. And so, you know, the second thing that comes to mind for me is, of course, Brene Brown, who has done so much work on shame. And she has this quote. She says, "Shame hates it when we reach out to tell our story. It hates having words wrapped around it. It can't survive being shared. Shame loves secrecy." And for me, I believe that fully, that the secrets that we keep create the shame that we live in that informs how we show up. And it really steals a lot of our joy and our happiness. And the third example I have is actually another book I read. I actually read half of it with my eyeballs, and then the other half I listened to. And I will say that I prefer reading it than listening to it in this case, but it's The Tell by Amy Griffin. Amy, just this story where Amy, it's a memoir. So she's talking about her lived experience, and she's talking about these things that she's spent her life like running from all kinds of things. She's just finding ways to be very distracted in career, in physically running, in, you know, all of these things, because she doesn't want to be still enough or quiet enough to hear the noise inside her head. And then because of her children and getting to that point where you're raising children who start to really kind of call you out for that and for not being emotionally available or emotionally present, she starts to really deal with that and go, wait a second, like what's going on here? And through this book, Amy starts to find ways to try and figure out what is it that she's running from. And as she starts to find that out, the book is called The Tell, because she feels like, wow, these things have held power over me for so long. And I know that it makes other people uncomfortable, but I have to tell. I have to take the power away by telling. And I just thought, wow, like that's a really interesting thing to think about, is Like, why do we stay so busy? What is it that we're trying to ignore? I certainly can relate to that. And, Brene Brown talks about, you know, when dealing with shame, you find your trusted folks that you can tell things to.
Yeah.
You don't need to always announce it to everybody, but, I don't have any judgment or argument for the path Amy chose to take. I think, she felt that in telling her story, that it would help other people
Yep.
to understand and to start normalizing. And so a really good book. It deals with, childhood sexual abuse and trauma. And so, like, don't read it if you're not prepared to deal with that. But, those are three things that really come to my mind when I think about secrets and how secrets have power over your life. And three examples that I think really kind of speak to that. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but that for me is why I feel like this book is about secrets.
I think when you personally going through and having something to hide, like first, like unknowingly
Did you
hide, but
tell
then
me, did you have secrets in your life? Do you have any experience with this?
me, no, I'm like an open book.
Did you ever pretend to be somebody that you're not? Was
I
her
do
name Julie?
think, did she make good sandwiches? And if you haven't seen that content, you should go check out some of our shorts because some good laughs there. But I do think having gone through the process of knowing who I was, struggling to accept who I was, finally sharing who I was very much so a journey. And when you talk about shame, like not only was this the feeling of shame about some of it being afraid of potential shame that I would bring upon my family, but shame from a religious standpoint, shame from a social perspective. Like I remember one of my first counseling sessions after I had come out and started going to therapy, my therapist just started asking me a lot of questions about like the way that I think, the way that I see things, the way that I engage with people, all of these things. And like we go through this what felt like a laundry list of questions. And I was like, what did we just do? Like, I don't understand why we just did it with our last hour. And he's said, like, I'm trying to understand if you potentially have internalized homophobia. And I had never heard of that before. And so I didn't understand. And I was like, well, like, what does that mean? And so he went on to explain how sometimes when you suppress that part of your life for so long, like some of it creates this alternative perspective that you then have to battle. And if you have to battle that, that's a different it's a different journey. It's still along the same lines of accepting who you are and all of those things. And luckily he did not feel like I had that.
Not layers of the onion you had to unpack there.
Yeah, no, nothing on that side. But I do think that once I started, like once he told me that phrase and I started learning more about it, I do think there became an awareness of whenever I would meet people. And I do think like if you are ever within the LGBTQIA plus community, you likely hear people's coming out stories. And part of that is your way of connecting with people. It's part of your story. It's part of what has brought you here. And so I do think that there is a level of explaining what you've been through, how you've gotten to where you are. And so I do think like when you talk about like unpacking those secrets, like to me, I feel like she was to me the story is about the connection with people and how when you feel like you have that support group, you feel like you can start working through things better. So
Yeah.
it was interesting to me whenever you said secrets because I was like, oh, I hadn't really thought of it from that perspective, but yes, like absolutely. Like there was this whole journey that she went on in both things that she knowingly was doing and then things that she comes to learn she was subconsciously doing to protect herself. But I thought it was very interesting that they made a whole scene of her and Raymond going to the coffee shop or the restaurant, wherever they were, to allow her to read through the newspapers because she didn't want to do it alone.
Yeah. Which I think at the beginning of the book,
She
like
never would have
there's
done that.
no world in which she would have done that. And to me, that's how you combat like the compelling need to keep things secret. I think sometimes people isolate themselves from others
Yeah.
physically so that, they can keep those feelings and emotions and things suppressed. Or, the fact that she's spending all of her weekend drinking, I obviously have nothing against drinking, but she's doing it, she says, to dull the thoughts because she's trying to isolate even from her own self. Then I think there's a different kind of isolation, which is one I struggle with, where you just sort of take your emotions and press them down. And so you can be in a room full of people and yet, incredibly isolated because only a portion of yourself you're allowing to
Right.
show up and be present. And I'm not suggesting that, you should just wear your heart and every innermost feeling on your sleeve at all times because, I do think Brene Brown is right in saying you need to treat yourself with care and not just, be vulnerable with everybody because not everybody deserves that level of
Right.
vulnerability.
Right.
But I also think, it's really important to be authentic and to love yourself first. And that's what we should all be striving for all of the time.
Right.
And then, like, to heck with everybody else. And I say that sort of flippantly because obviously our world doesn't just revolve around us, and how we interact with others is important and how we make them feel and all of these things. But I just mean, we give people so much power to inform us of who they think we are. And oftentimes, when you're hiding these secrets, it's like you're giving somebody else power to tell you who you think you are, except you're the one doing all the telling. Like
Right.
you're telling yourself what they are going to think of you, and you're not even giving them the opportunity to do that.
Right.
And I think when Eleanor starts to open up to Raymond, it's like before she's judging Raymond, but to me that's a self-defense mechanism because she believes Raymond is going to judge her just like she is feeling from
Yeah.
everybody else. And then the other thing is, the other people, the way that she describes them, you're seeing it from her perspective.
Correct.
So what about those interactions, what percentage of that is authentically how they are showing up, and what percentage of that is what Eleanor is interpreting because of
Right.
what she believes about herself and how she's projecting that on other people.
Well, there's a whole scene with her on the bus where she is describing like how she goes through the process of deciding who she's going to sit by.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting that, well, one of the ways that she describes like the person that she would not want to sit by is I think someone that we would all kind of agree with, like we would not want to sit next to someone who is without shoes, without socks, who is like coughing, sneezing, kind of, you know, on a bus. Like,
Yeah.
and then she goes through this aha moment of like she gets a seat by herself and then no one wants to sit by her. And this is like much later in the book as she's been going to therapy and things like that, but she, I think, then starts to acknowledge exactly like what you're saying. Like you start to go through, well, why am I casting judgment? Because the only person that showed her a moment of kindness on that bus was a person who didn't have socks on as he was leaving the bus. And so it challenged her reality of what she had going on up here.
Well, and I think there was a point at which she was eating a tuna fish sandwich or something on the bus.
Yep.
Like she was the person no one wants to sit by because who wants to smell somebody else's tuna fish sandwich? And you start to see this empathy that she starts to experience the
Yes.
more she lets her walls down. And she has to start listening to what's going on inside her head little by little in order to be able to interact with the world around her. So I really feel like there's a really good message there. And I think the other thing that this brings to mind for me is group therapy, individual therapy, AA meetings, those kinds of support systems. They're around for a reason. Like they
Right.
work for a reason, and it gets you speaking your truth so that that truth doesn't hold this power over you. And the more
Right.
that you get comfortable talking about it, the more you often see like your traumatic experience is uniquely yours, and yet
Right.
you are not alone in it. And so many people who to you their lives look just perfect, they're hiding something, they're also hiding something that is
Right.
holding power over them. And I think that it's letting those walls down where you start to reframe the way that you think about life in general. And that is, I believe, what takes Eleanor from being this person that is just wasting her life going through the motions, being deeply unhappy, to this person who is ready to deal with the trauma from her past. And, like we talked about, your body is like just such an amazing thing. Your brain is neuroscience is such an amazing thing. And it is encoding those memories in a secret place inside your mind until you are able to process what
Yep.
is going on. And, what we know happens is that when memories get encoded, it's not just like a movie playing, it's all of your senses that get interpreted and then jumbled up and encoded. And so if you've ever like been in a place where you have a smell that comes through and you have, thoughts, maybe happy thoughts, smell chocolate chip cookies and it takes you back to your grandma's house or something like that. That's how memory works. And so when you have these memories that are traumatic that you can't really recall consciously, but subconsciously they're still there, and you experience one of those sensory reactions, whether it's a feeling or a smell or a, sound or something, it just brings you back to that state.
Yep.
And oftentimes like hijacks the amygdala so that you cannot respond in a way that you feel is consistently appropriate. And oftentimes people get defensive then. And when they feel themselves sort of getting out of control. And like that's the whole thing about PTSD, right? Is you hear something and it takes you back to this really traumatic moment. Because your sensory is getting triggered, and so this is part of why I think it's just so important to recognize those things, because that's how trauma holds power over you years to come.
Right.
um, and so if we invest the time with the right resources, you don't always have to remember all of these things, because sometimes there are things you'll never want to remember, but to just acknowledge like what's going on inside of yourself, I think can be so freeing, so that that trauma doesn't continue to hold this power over you.
Right. Well, and I think you said it really well earlier around like when you don't talk about it and when it is all just up here and stewing, and like there is something about saying it. That because it is a process for you to think it and then for words to come out of your mouth, and whether it is to someone else or just to yourself, like it is your brain processing it in a different way. It's hearing it in a different way. And so we talk about self care, and I love the journey that she goes on where she's going to therapy and she doesn't believe in it. Like she doesn't want to do it. She's not interested in doing it. Many of the sessions go the same way, like where, nope, I don't want to talk about that. Nope, I'm not talking about that. Nope, I'm not ready for that. But the story continued, and she does go on this journey. And so I think I also appreciated that it gave like that realistic perspective that it's not a one and done type situation. Like
Yeah.
it's a process to go through, and it is being purposeful, and it is trusting the people that you have around you to help you through that process. And I think you're right. At the end of the story, it's not and she rides off into the sunset. Like it's
You
that
fill in the journey.
correct. And I really appreciated that they talked about that. And although it wasn't you were on the journey with her through a lot of it, and then it's almost like she's now in this safe place, and so it's okay for you to let her go and allow her story to
And
continue.
yeah, absolutely. Well, and I don't think this is said overtly, but what you understand is that she feels very responsible for not saving her sister. And there
She
is a
does.
lot of shame she has in that. And, that's informing how she feels about herself and how she treats herself.
Yep.
And so she's not being kind to herself. She doesn't believe. So there's these conversations she has with her mom, like this is her own voice in her head,
Right.
and she's using her mom as a figure to continue informing herself of who she is. Like that to me is just such a powerful symbol of, what secrets do. because
Yep.
when she starts to talk about it, she starts to realize that maybe something else could be true. And it breaks the power, that this voice that was formed very early on in her life had over her. And, of course, I have no judgment about, where she is on this journey and how she came to be there. I mean, she's a fictional character, but she's exactly where she probably should be based on the experience that she's
Yeah.
having. And I mean, how this author just, to me, so like articulately nailed the emotions is just bewildering, really, to
Right.
me.
She's had to have had friends and people close to her that either have gone through this process and she
Or
has
she
been there
studied
for
it, or
them.
she's been, I
Right.
don't know.
Because it is like when I tell you this, the the way that she connects with people towards the end of the story and how different it is. She's now making jokes and people don't know how to react because she's making jokes and she's never done that before.
Yeah.
And but she's like realizes that now. And so she knows like, oh, I need to hey, I'm joking. Like
Yeah.
I just think like that is a to me a very well developed character who has gone on a journey who you've had the opportunity to pick up on like right at the precipice of that journey starting and you don't see it through the finish but you see this opportunity for development and change.
In future, yeah, she's on the
Correct.
path.
And so I think that's what's inspirational for us as the readers is like we have that opportunity as well. Like what has happened in our lives and what is or currently happening in our lives. Like that doesn't have to define who we are. That doesn't have to be the person that we are. That doesn't have to be the truth that we accept as ourselves. We get to be who we want to be. We get to develop and grow into the person that we want to be.
Yeah, well, and the finish line isn't fixed. It's on the
Right.
path, right? Like, because we will be on this path until our last breath,
Which
like,
we've talked about. Like it's not about trying to obtain this idyllic state. It's about understanding that you're on this journey and there's growth to be had and there's challenges to face, but it's the people that you surround yourself with. It's the openness that you're willing to be with people that allow you to that is either going to be a very tough, but I'm in it with other people journey or a very isolating uphill battle that you may be facing.
yeah. So, how do you combat shame? How do you deal with shame in your life?
I mean, I probably don't do it as well as like I probably should because I do think like I struggle. Like I walk away from conversations, interactions, and I sit in stuff and I struggle to accept like I could have said this better or I should have done this or but I think giving myself the grace that I am learning, that I am growing. And if I feel like I have done something wrong and I need to go back and correct something, I own it. Like,
Yeah.
because it's creating that space for others. But I think I've also had to come to this place of, Chris, just let it go. Like, it's happened. There is nothing you can do about it now. The past is the past. Can't change it. We can just use that to inform us as we move forward. And Frank does a really good job of like, uh, keeping me in that mindset of the here and now and how we're using information to move us forward.
It's so good to have people in your life who can help bring a different perspective and
Yeah,
use their strengths that they have to help you kind of fill in those gaps, right?
absolutely. Because I do, like I've talked about having a very loud internal dialogue and I really do. And what I appreciate about this book is I felt like at least the way that it was read, you clearly knew when it was her dialogue versus like her interaction with someone.
Yeah.
And it just like I felt seen, I felt heard, I was like, oh my gosh, others are have just as loud thoughts as I do.
So you liked
And
the book.
I did. Ultimately, I came to a place of where this went into a place of like hope and inspiration and it being a journey for people to go on and understand where the other book, Eileen, took this very dark turn.
I will not be reading that.
No, don't. I do not recommend this book, but I will say in reflecting on the two, you do come to learn that Eileen learns life lessons and starts using those to inform her life after she has removed herself from a situation. But
Mm.
there is nothing along her, it's like the last chapter that you start to hear more about her life today and what's brought her here,
I hate
between
that.
like the
That's
story.
not the story. The story is
No,
about all the messed up.
exactly. So I will say like that, where I feel like they took the two different ways, and I will be team Eleanor for forever.
Well, one of the things that I have been practicing in my friendship, my time that I have been friends with you, like I also get caught in the shame spiral, and it really, you know this, it really can spin me up sometimes. And what's super uncomfortable is to leave something unresolved. Like, I know that that is uncomfortable for most people. It is one of the most, like, the shame spiral turns into the anxiety spiral, and there is nothing else that I can do. And I make myself physically ill. And I have come a long way over, 20 years or so in figuring this out. But really, in the last probably, I don't know, 5 years or so, this is something that I have been actively really working on. And what I believed about myself before is that I just didn't have the ability to walk away from something without it being resolved.
Yeah.
Maybe I made a mistake, or somebody has misinterpreted something and it feels really big to me, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And until I resolve it, and like this could be true of an incident that happens in the work setting, it can be true in a friendship situation. It has been true, like even in our marriage, and like years ago being up, at 3 a.m. fighting, which is literally the worst time to fight. I don't know where this advice came from that said, don't go to bed angry. Like, fight in the morning. That's my advice. Like, don't fight at 2 or 3 in the morning. Like, go get some sleep. Everybody just calm down, and then have your fight when you're not,
Exhausted.
and sleep deprived. And yet my dear husband and partner hung in there with me because, I'm sure he could see that, like, I just had to get it out. But one of the things that I've been practicing is, and I didn't realize this was an option, like, you can actually put it down and walk away from it and distract yourself with something else. This is when I think distraction is a good technique. Like, call a friend and say, I need you to distract me. And I believe I have done that with you. Need you to distract me from this because I am not going to call this person at this hour over this weekend while they are dealing with this something else. And yet I can't think about anything else. I am fixating. I am in a
Yeah.
spiral. And like what I have realized is that as I practice this, it's like a muscle that you can build. And like, wow, okay. So, and once I get some distance, which is also something that we talked about in a previous podcast, giving yourself, like, that's a technique you can use to give yourself some distance from a
Yep.
situation and then come back and see it a little more objectively. And you'd just be smarter almost every time. So I think that's really good. I think journaling is it's actually, I hate it when people tell me to journal. It's just freaking annoying.
But I'll say that your journaling I think journaling is very personal. And so I think there are people who actually like journal, like have a spiral and a pen and paper, and they write it down. But then there's other people who do voice to text or voice notes or like whatever.
Tell me about my journaling.
No, but I think like that's because you've shared a couple of things like that you've shared as you're like commuting, and
Uh-huh.
number one, it's like poetic. I'm like, okay, is this like an excerpt from like a book you're reading? What's happening here? And you're like, no, those are just my car thoughts. I'm like, all right, well, you and I have very different car thoughts. But also, like, I saw someone I've shared previously, like I've seen people on social media who have shared in different ways. Like, to some people, a journal is a bullet point list. To some people, it's a sticky note. To some people, it's a very like detailed diary. Like, I think we talk about needing to process things and get them out. Like, whatever that looks like for you, like, do that. And if
Well,
you are,
I think the reason I resist journaling is probably because it is helpful. It does help you.
it helps you process, and I don't want to process right now.
Drink the medicine, Jen. Just take the medicine. So my therapist is not listening to this. We're right, okay? I tell him, I do the things that you tell me to do. I just don't tell you that I did it. Wait a second. You think that I'm ignoring the homework you gave me? I did it. I just want to talk about it. And you didn't ask me.
I
so.
doubt you are his only patient that does that.
So he's like, I don't know if I'm going to give you homework. You don't do. And I'm like, oh, no, I've been doing that. Wait, just you didn't ask me, so I didn't talk about it. What's worse than journaling? Talking about journaling. No, and I do have some stuff in my past specifically around journaling, and so that's a whole other thing. But I do think that it's helpful to get the thoughts out of your head and on paper, because once you have it there, then you tend to start seeing it maybe a little differently than what you did, but at least you get it out. And I think the other thing is just like stop chasing perfect, which is like, why do we do this?
I think it's
Why are
much
some of
easier
us
said than done because I
so
think there's,
encoded?
yeah, I think there's a level of wanting to make people happy, not wanting to feel ashamed of what I've done, like all these things. And we've talked about many of them. Like, just because that's the way that we were taught or that's the way we were raised, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right way to move forward with it.
Yeah, it's not
Like,
actually being kind to yourself. So
right.
just, that takes a lot of power out of shame. Like, yeah, I made a mistake. Like, why should I be ashamed of that? And I think taking the time to ask those questions and like really sit with them and go, okay, well, like why do I think this is super helpful. So if you haven't read, Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine. We may have, spoiled some of the joy of reading, although Chris did warn you that this
I
was
did. I totally said that there were spoiler alerts. But if you have read it or you're like, oh gosh, I haven't read it in such a long time, I want to reread it. Please do and share your thoughts with us. Like if you've read Eileen and you have a different perspective than I do, I would love to hear that because seriously, I feel bad for the character, but I do not feel like endeared to her by any stretch of the
I'm not going to
imagination.
read that. I'm
Don't
not
read
reading
that,
it.
but share with us. Like there's different depending on what platform you're listening to us on, you can throw a note or comment in the comment section. You can also send us an email at chrisjeninthemorning@gmail.com, or you can leave us a voicemail or text us. We are still waiting on that first text message.
Still waiting. We're still waiting.
And that number is 940-278-8129.
Yes. And don't forget to follow us on social media. We are on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I don't know, all the places. Chris and Jen ITM. And yes, ITM stands for in the morning because we just felt like you didn't want to type all of those words out.
But you definitely want to type our names, right? Like Chris
But
and
they're
Jen?
easy, easy
Absolutely.
breezy. We didn't go with Christopher and Jennifer. I mean, come on. You know how many people cannot spell Jennifer? It's a
Well,
lot.
there's
It's a lot
so
of
many
people.
different ways to spell Jennifer.
There's really just one way that most people spell Jennifer.
All right.
It's two
There's a lot
N's.
to spell Christopher, which I really didn't know until I moved here to New York, and there are many
A
people
lot
who
of
spell it
K's.
differently.
It's a lot of K's.
K's, F's, lots of
F's.
things.
Yeah. But like, follow, subscribe, comment, and until next time, be kind to one another and make it a great week.
Bye, everyone.